The crystal chandeliers gleamed above them, casting a warm, golden glow across the dining room. Eleanor Delacourt sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her fingers resting lightly on the delicate bone china. To her left sat her son, Henry, looking uncharacteristically nervous as he adjusted the collar of his tailored shirt. Across from him was a young woman with auburn hair, wearing a simple, navy blue dress that, though modest, brought out the striking green of her eyes. "Elena, isn't it?" Eleanor said smoothly, her voice a mixture of politeness and calculated interest. "Yes, Mrs. Delacourt," the young woman replied, her voice soft but steady. She met Eleanor's gaze, betraying none of the anxiety she felt beneath her composed exterior. She knew Eleanor's reputation, after all. Eleanor Delacourt was one of New York's most influential socialites and known for her sharp judgment. Henry's hand found its way under the table to give Elena's fingers a reassuring squeeze. He had warned her that his mother could be difficult, but Elena was not prepared for the intensity of the woman's stare or the way she scrutinized her every move. As the servers began to bring out the first course, Eleanor offered a polished smile and remarked, "Henry tells me you're in your final year of art school." She picked up her wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid as though it were a mere afterthought. "Yes, I'll be graduating soon," Elena replied, doing her best to sound confident. She noticed the server pouring Eleanor a particularly generous glass of wine. She wondered if this was part of Eleanor's plan, perhaps to make her feel less, to subtly highlight the vast gulf between their worlds. But Elena held her head high. "That must be an interesting choice," Eleanor said, her tone light yet tinged with faint disapproval. "And I suppose Henry's been helping you cover tuition and rent?" She tilted her head, her voice as smooth as silk, but her words had the impact of cold steel. Henry looked sharply at his mother, but before he could respond, Elena spoke up. "No, actually. I've been paying my own way with part-time work and a few scholarships," Elena replied, her cheeks warming, though she forced herself to smile. She wasn't here to prove anything, and yet she felt her resolve harden. If Eleanor wanted to challenge her, she would find Elena more than capable. Henry cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Mom, you'll love Elena's work. She has an exhibition coming up in the city next month. It's already gotten interest from a couple of galleries." Eleanor's eyebrows lifted, a hint of surprise breaking through her composure. "Oh. That's unexpected. I might just have to see it for myself." There was something in her tone that Elena couldn't quite place, a glimmer of amusement or perhaps even satisfaction. For a moment, she wondered if Eleanor was actually impressed. But just as quickly, the older woman returned to her calculating demeanor. As the conversation continued, Eleanor directed most of her questions toward Elena's background, her family, and her future plans, and with each answer Elena gave, Eleanor's eyes narrowed with an intensity that made Elena's heart beat faster. By the time the main course arrived, it felt like Eleanor had probed nearly every aspect of Elena's life, leaving no stone unturned. Henry, to his credit, tried to steer the conversation away, but Eleanor always found a way to bring it back, casting veiled doubts on Elena's suitability as a partner for her son. Finally, as dessert was served, a delicate raspberry sorbet, Eleanor leaned forward, her hands clasped together as she looked Elena square in the eye. "Tell me, Elena," Eleanor began, her voice as smooth as velvet yet carrying an unmistakable edge. "What is it you really want from Henry? After all, it can't be easy maintaining a relationship with someone of his resources." Elena felt the question land like a blow. The room went silent, Henry's expression shifting to one of horror and helplessness as his mother's words settled over them. Eleanor's tone had been polite, almost kind, but there was no mistaking the insult lurking beneath. With a calmness that surprised even herself, Elena met Eleanor's gaze, her voice steady and filled with quiet strength. "What I want, Mrs. Delacourt, is for Henry to be happy. Just as I imagine any mother would wish for her child." Eleanor's smile tightened, but she said nothing. Elena's answer seemed to take the wind out of her, and for a moment, she appeared almost lost, as though caught off guard. The silence that followed was thick, tense, and unbroken until Eleanor lifted her glass, offering a soft, almost reluctant toast. To happiness, then. They all raised their glasses, but as Elena took a sip, she felt a strange, unspoken tension settle over the table. She had the feeling that this dinner had been more than just a test of character. Eleanor had plans that went beyond tonight's dinner. And as she exchanged a glance with Henry, Elena wondered just what she had gotten herself into. The evening following Eleanor's dinner invitation lingered in Elena's mind like a bad dream. Despite Eleanor's coldness, she'd managed to hold her ground. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor wasn't finished. That night, when she and Henry had returned to her small apartment, he'd done his best to reassure her, insisting that his mother's behavior was simply her way. Yet, something about Eleanor's final look, almost triumphant, made Elena feel that the night was far from over. 3 days later, Henry called her during his lunch break, sounding unusually tense. "Mom wants to have you over for another dinner," he said. "She insists she didn't get the chance to properly know you the other night and claims this one will be more intimate." Elena couldn't hide her surprise. "Intimate? Do you think that's true, or is she planning to quiz me about my tax returns and kindergarten grades this time?" Henry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I know her, Elena. She's doing this for a reason. I think she's still testing you." He paused, then added, "You don't have to go if you don't want to." Elena felt a flash of defiance. "No. I'll go." She knew that declining would only play into Eleanor's hands, and as much as she dreaded another evening under Eleanor's watchful gaze, something inside her wanted to prove herself, wanted to show Henry, if no one else, that she could handle anything Eleanor threw her way. The evening of the second dinner, Elena wore a modest but elegant black dress, hoping to strike the balance between sophistication and sincerity. Henry picked her up, his usual charm subdued, a reflection of his own nerves. "Let's get through this together," he said, squeezing her hand as they entered the grandiose Delacourt townhouse. To Elena's surprise, the dinner setup was much more intimate than the first, just 4 seats, one conspicuously empty. They were joined by a distinguished-looking gentleman named Lawrence King, a family friend of the Delacourts and a successful businessman. His tailored suit and silver hair spoke of wealth and refinement, but his easy smile and warm handshake offered her a small relief. "Eleanor has told me about you," Lawrence said as they sat down. "An artist, I hear?" His eyes held genuine interest, unlike Eleanor's scrutinizing gaze from across the table. "Yes, I'm finishing my degree soon," Elena replied, smiling politely, though she couldn't help but feel her stomach tighten. After some pleasant conversation, Eleanor cleared her throat. "I thought it would be good for you two to meet," she said to Elena, her voice oozing an uncharacteristic sweetness. "Lawrence knows all about the art world, don't you, Lawrence? He's helped many young artists find their footing." Lawrence nodded, smiling kindly. "It's true. I do what I can. And I must say, it's refreshing to meet someone like you. Not many are willing to brave the demands of the art world." Henry shot Elena a cautious look, as if to say, "Stay guarded." But Elena felt Lawrence's sincerity and relaxed. "I appreciate that, Mr. King," she replied. "It's a challenging field, but I feel it's what I'm meant to do." Eleanor's eyes flashed with a strange satisfaction, and she lifted her glass. "Then here's to success and to following one's dreams." She took a sip, then added, as if casually, "Of course, following dreams doesn't always pay the bills, does it?" Elena's cheeks colored, but she forced herself to stay calm. Eleanor's words stung, but she knew better than to let her composure slip. "That may be true," she responded, meeting Eleanor's gaze, "but success has different definitions. To me, it's about fulfillment, not just finances." Lawrence chuckled, clearly impressed, and Henry beamed at her. Eleanor, however, gave a small, unconvincing smile. Interesting perspective, she murmured, but her eyes told a different story. She wasn't pleased with Elena's answer. After dinner, Eleanor invited them all to the sitting room for coffee. Elena noticed that Lawrence seemed eager to continue their conversation. "I understand you have an exhibition coming up," he asked her. "Yes, at a small gallery downtown," she said, her excitement finally bubbling up. "It's my first one, so I'm nervous but grateful for the opportunity." Lawrence nodded approvingly. "I'll make a point to attend." "It sounds like a promising start." Eleanor's eyes glinted. "Well, it seems you've already made an impression, Elena. You're quite fortunate to have someone of Lawrence's influence interested in your work." Elena felt a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. She appreciated Lawrence's support, but Eleanor's tone felt more manipulative than congratulatory. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this interest was part of a larger scheme. Was Eleanor trying to set her up for something? As the evening wound down, Henry walked Elena to the door, where he pulled her aside. "I don't know what she's planning, but whatever it is, I'm with you, Elena. Don't let her get under your skin." Elena nodded, grateful for his words, but her mind was racing. She hadn't told Henry, but during dessert, Eleanor had slipped her a small, sealed envelope under the table. Inside, there was a handwritten note, in Eleanor's perfect cursive. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. meet me at Café d'Orsay. Alone. I have something to discuss with you." The message was simple, yet the implication was heavy. Eleanor was not finished yet, and somehow, Elena felt that whatever came next would challenge her in ways she could hardly anticipate. As she slipped into the night, her pulse quickened. What did Eleanor want from her? And why was it so important for this meeting to be kept secret from Henry? She had no choice. Tomorrow, she would face Eleanor's challenge head-on. The next morning, Elena stood in front of her mirror, her reflection staring back at her with a mixture of determination and apprehension. The black dress from the previous night felt like a shroud of armor. Today was different. She would be facing Eleanor alone. The thought filled her with both dread and resolve. She couldn't allow Eleanor's intimidation tactics to derail her dreams. At 9:45 a.m., Elena arrived at Café d'Orsay, a charming French café nestled on a bustling street. The café's warm ambience was a stark contrast to her growing unease. She pushed the door open, a small bell jingling overhead, and found a corner table with a view of the street. The aroma of fresh croissants and brewing coffee surrounded her, but it did little to calm her racing heart. As she sat waiting, she tried to focus on the bustling life outside, mothers with strollers, businessmen hurrying by, and tourists stopping to snap photos. Each moment stretched into eternity as she checked her watch again and again. Finally, Eleanor entered the café, her presence commanding even in the modest setting. She wore a tailored cream blazer over a crisp white blouse and tailored trousers, exuding the kind of confidence that turned heads. Elena's stomach nodded as Eleanor approached, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. She took a seat opposite Elena without waiting for an invitation, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said, her tone a mixture of businesslike formality and a hint of something deeper. She gestured to the waiter for coffee, her demeanor cool and collected. Elena met her gaze, steadying herself. "Of course. I wasn't sure what this was about, but I'm here." Eleanor studied her for a moment, her eyes sharp and calculating. "Good. Let's get to the point. You've captured Henry's attention, and while I can appreciate your ambition, I need to understand your intentions." Elena felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but quickly tamped it down. "Henry and I care about each other. That's all there is to it." The words came out more firmly than she anticipated, a rush of defiance mixing with her nerves. Eleanor leaned back slightly, folding her hands on the table, her expression thoughtful yet critical. "I see. But you must understand that relationships, especially in our world, are complicated. Henry has a future to consider, one that involves significant financial resources and connections. Are you truly equipped for that? Or are you merely playing a role in a world you don't belong to? The words stung. Elena fought against the wave of doubt rising within her. I'm not looking for a role. I'm an artist, and I'm pursuing my career. Henry supports me, and I support him. Isn't that what relationships are about? Eleanor's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. Yes. Support. I admire that. But tell me, what happens when the financial strain of your art career becomes too much? What happens when Henry's obligations demand more than you can give? Elena felt her chest tighten. I believe in hard work and perseverance. I'm not asking for handouts, I'm creating my own path. Creating your own path. Eleanor repeated the phrase as if savoring it. That's commendable, but naive. The world is not as kind as we'd like it to be, especially for artists. Many never find success. Elena met Eleanor's gaze, the intensity between them palpable. And many do. You can't dismiss the talent or the drive of others simply because it didn't align with your expectations. Eleanor paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. You are quite resilient, aren't you? I will give you that. Her voice lowered, the tension in the air shifting. But tell me, what if I were to help you? What if I could connect you with the right people, the right galleries? Would you be open to that? Elena's heart raced, caught between disbelief and caution. What's the catch? She asked, wary of Eleanor's intentions. Eleanor chuckled softly, as if Elena's skepticism amused her. You're smart. There's always a catch, isn't there? But let's not jump to conclusions. I want to help you. If you can prove to me that you're serious about Henry and that you can handle the scrutiny that comes with being part of our world. What does that even mean? Elena asked, her patience beginning to wear thin. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Meet my expectations, and I'll introduce you to those who can elevate your career. Fail, and you'll not only lose Henry's affection, but your credibility in this city as well. In this social circle, reputation is everything. Elena felt the weight of Eleanor's words sink in, the stakes becoming frighteningly clear. This was not merely about love, it was about survival in a world that would chew her up and spit her out if she wasn't careful. What do you want from me, exactly? Elena pressed, her resolve hardening. How do I prove myself? Eleanor's lips curled into a knowing smile, one that sent a shiver down Elena's spine. Be charming, be poised, and always keep your goals in sight. Show me that you can navigate my world without losing yourself. If you do, I might just consider helping you. The challenge hung in the air, thick with tension. Elena's heart raced, but she felt a rush of determination. She would not back down. This was her moment to shine, and despite Eleanor's manipulative approach, she sensed an opportunity. As they sipped their coffee, the two women engaged in a verbal dance, one of power, ambition, and unspoken fears. Elena knew that this meeting could either be the beginning of her career or the end of her relationship with Henry. She had a choice to make, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. But one thing was clear, she would not let Eleanor Delacourt dictate her future. As the cafe buzzed around them, Elena sat tall, ready to carve her own path, even if it meant walking a tightrope that could bring her crashing down. The days that followed the meeting at Café d'Orsay were a whirlwind of emotions for Elena. Eleanor's words echoed in her mind, haunting her even in the quiet moments. The challenge was set, and she had committed to proving herself, but at what cost? As much as she wanted to further her career, she was equally determined not to lose herself in the process. Henry noticed the change in her demeanor. He was always perceptive, able to read her like an open book. You seem distant, he remarked one evening as they walked through Central Park, the leaves shimmering with the colors of fall. Is everything okay? Elena hesitated, searching for the right words. It's just, things are complicated with your mother, she admitted. She wants me to prove myself in a way that feels, I don't know, superficial? I want to be myself, Henry. He nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. What does she expect you to do? Be charming. Play the social game. Get to know the right people. It feels like a lot of pressure, she said, frustration rising. And it's all under the guise of helping my career. Henry stopped walking and turned to her, his expression serious. You don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with. If she's making you feel that way, maybe you shouldn't engage with her plans. But if I don't, Elena replied, frustration spilling over, I could lose everything. You. My chance to make it in the art world. What if this is my only shot? She looked into his eyes, searching for understanding, but she also felt the growing rift between them, a chasm created by the pressures of their worlds. Henry's face softened, and he reached for her hands. I'll always support you, Elena. Just promise me you won't lose sight of who you are. That's the most important thing. The reassurance filled her with warmth, but doubt still nagged at her. How could she navigate this treacherous path without sacrificing her authenticity? She resolved to play Eleanor's game, but on her own terms. The following week, as the day of her exhibition approached, Elena decided to face Eleanor head-on. She would attend the lavish charity gala that Eleanor was hosting, but she would do so armed with her own strength and convictions. When the night of the gala arrived, Elena felt a rush of excitement mixed with anxiety. The venue was a stunning ballroom, filled with the city's elite. Elegant chandeliers twinkled above, casting soft light on the sea of designer dresses and sharp tuxedos. Despite the opulence, Elena felt a sense of resolve wash over her. She was here not just as a participant, but as a woman with her own dreams and aspirations. As she stepped into the room, Eleanor spotted her immediately, a small smirk gracing her lips. You made it, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I'm glad you could find the time to join us. I wouldn't miss it, Elena replied, keeping her tone light despite the tension that buzzed between them. She could see the glimmer of approval in Eleanor's eyes, but she also sensed the challenge was far from over. Throughout the night, Elena engaged with various guests, putting into practice the skills Eleanor had insisted were necessary. She mingled, laughed, and shared stories, but all the while, she remained true to herself. Henry stood by her side, offering support and encouragement, and she could feel the warmth of his presence grounding her. As the evening progressed, Elena felt a surge of confidence. She was not merely playing a role, she was crafting her narrative, one that aligned with her values and ambitions. She found herself speaking with influential art critics and gallery owners, sharing her vision for her upcoming exhibition. The more she spoke, the more she felt their genuine interest. Then, as the night drew to a close, Eleanor called for everyone's attention. I'd like to announce a special guest who has graciously agreed to support the local art community, she declared, her voice ringing through the hall. Please welcome Lawrence King. Elena's heart sank as Lawrence entered, his presence commanding and charismatic. He had been the one to engage with her, and now he was being presented as a figure of authority in Eleanor's world. Would he truly be the key to her success, or just another pawn in Eleanor's game? After Lawrence spoke, he made his way over to Elena. You've been making quite an impression tonight, he said, genuinely smiling. I've heard wonderful things about your work. I'd love to discuss it further. Elena's heart raced as she felt a wave of possibility wash over her. Thank you, Mr. King. I'd be thrilled to chat. I believe there's a lot we could collaborate on. As they exchanged ideas, Elena felt the weight of the moment. She had stepped into a world fraught with complexities, yet she was navigating it with grace. Eleanor watched from a distance, a flicker of surprise on her face. After a few moments, Henry joined them. I see you're making connections, he said, pride evident in his voice. I knew you could do it. Elena turned to Henry, a sense of joy flooding through her. I'm just being me, she said, glancing back at Eleanor, who was now observing them with a mixture of intrigue and begrudging respect. In that moment, she understood that she was no longer just a guest at Eleanor's table, she was building her own. The success that lay ahead was hers to shape, and she could do it without losing herself. As the gala wound down and guests began to filter out, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had faced Eleanor's challenges, and through it all, she had remained true to herself and to Henry. In the midst of all the opulence, she had discovered her own strength. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand through the streets of New York, Henry turned to her, his eyes shining with admiration. "I'm proud of you, Elena. You held your ground. You didn't let her change you." "Thanks to you," she replied, leaning into him. "Your support means everything. This is just the beginning." They paused under the glow of a street lamp, and Elena realized that her journey was not just about art or ambition, it was about love, resilience, and the courage to stand up for herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, not just for herself, but for the life she wanted to build with Henry. And as they walked into the night, Elena felt a sense of hope unfurling within her, as bright and promising as the city that surrounded them. Whatever came next, she would embrace it with open arms, ready to create her own masterpiece. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.